specific hazards and mitigation. Let us learn about floods and significance of mitigation. The Indian subcontinent is prone to a large number of natural hazards, namely floods, cyclones, earthquakes, and landslides, bringing in a huge loss of life, livelihood, property, and infrastructure. In this chapter, let us try to understand the various structural and non-structural measures that could be taken up by the community, government, and non-governmental organizations in pre- and post-disaster phases, which would help in creating awareness and be better prepared. Since 1975, Ralegaon Siddhi, a village in Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra, was affected by severe drought. Agriculture failed, leaving people jobless. The per capita income was unbelievably low at Rs 271 per annum. A revolution led by Anna Hazare helped the villagers to combat the recurrent. That the village shows that community efforts and cooperation from the local government and non-governmental organizations helped the people of Ralegaon Siddhi to prevent the recurring problem from becoming a disaster. After reading the report mentioned above, we can say that awareness and preparedness can go a long way in minimizing the impact of a hazard. Different hazards have different mitigation strategies. In this chapter, let us try to analyze the various mitigation strategies adopted for different hazards. Mitigation, as we know, refers to any measure taken to minimize the impact of a disaster or potential disaster. Mitigation can take place before, during, or after a disaster, but the term is most often used to refer to action taken against potential disaster. Significance of mitigation. Mitigation efforts help the people by creating safer communities and reducing loss of life and property. Some mitigation measures include enforcing strict building codes, flood-proofing requirements, seismic design standards, and wind bracing requirements for new construction or repairing existing buildings. Construction of houses away from hazardous areas. Retrofitting public buildings to withstand strong winds or ground shaking. Building community shelters to help protect people in areas which are prone to various hazards. Mitigation's value to society. Mitigation creates safer communities by reducing losses of life and property. Mitigation enables individuals and communities to recover more rapidly from disasters. Mitigation lessens the financial impact of disasters on government and communities. Mitigation efforts can be categorized as structural, such as construction of river embankments or strengthening existing buildings, and non-structural, such as training in disaster management, regulating land use, public education, etc. Let us now study the different mitigation measures for each of the hazards, as mitigation measures vary with each hazard. While there are several common components which form the mitigation strategy for various disasters, there is need to know about the area, the cultural requirements, and the best possible ways in which the mitigation can become effective for that particular region. Floods. Floods are temporary inundation of large regions as a result of an increase in reservoir or of rivers flooding their banks because of heavy rains, high winds, cyclones, storm surge along coast, tsunami, melting of snow, or dam burst. Floods have been a recurrent phenomena in India, with more than 12% of the total land area prone to floods. It is necessary to take adequate structural and non-structural mitigation measures. Warning: Except for flash floods, there is usually a reasonable warning period. The Central Water Commission, Irrigation and Flood Control Department and Water Resources Department of Government of India are responsible for flood detecting, tracking, receiving warning and disseminating information. Flood. Flood warning information is disseminated by the following means: government channels, high priority telegrams, Doordarshan and the local cable channels, All India Radio, bulletins in the press. Mitigation strategies. There are a large number of structural and non-structural mitigation measures that can be taken up to reduce the impact of floods in areas that are frequently battered by floods. Some of the mitigation strategies include structural mitigation. A. Watershed management. Timely cleaning, desilting, and deepening of natural water reservoir and drainage channels, both urban and rural, must be taken up. The entire natural water storage place should be cleaned on a regular basis, especially before the monsoon season. Encroachments on tanks and ponds or natural drainage channels to be removed well before the onset of monsoon. Buildings on elevated area. The buildings in flood-prone areas should be constructed on an elevated area and, if necessary, on stilts and platforms. Natural water retention basin. Construction and protection of flood protection embankments, ring bunds and other bunds. Dams and levees can also be constructed, which can be used as temporary storing space, which will reduce the chances of lower plains getting flooded. Implementing flood control measures to reduce flood damage. Measures can be taken to reduce the runoff by reforestation, protection of vegetation, cleaning of debris from streams, etc. Non-structural mitigation. Mapping of floodplains is the first step involved in reducing risk of floods. Land use control will reduce the danger to life and property when water inundates the floodplains and the coastal areas. No major development should be permitted in areas which are subjected to flooding. Important facilities like hospitals should be located in safer and elevated areas. Flood forecasting and warning. Better facilities would help in reducing the impact of loads. Summary. The Indian subcontinent is prone to a large number of natural hazards, namely floods, cyclones, earthquakes, and landslides, bringing in a huge loss to life, livelihood, property, and infrastructure. Mitigation, as we know, refers to any measure taken to minimize the impact of a disaster or potential disaster. Mitigation can take place before, during, or after a disaster, but the term is most often used to refer to action taken against potential disaster. There are a large number of structural and non-structural mitigation measures that can be taken up to reduce the impact of floods in areas that are frequently battered by floods. That is all in this topic. Always take proper measures and stay safe. Learning is fun.